When the supply and demand curves intersect, that is when the market is in equilibrium, and this is when the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied are equal. In the graph shown, that's represented by point A. This is something that's more of a hypothetical than something that is actually possible, because in this model we assume that we have perfect information, zero transactions costs, and low barriers to entry and exit, and there's many alternatives. However, when you get into actual markets, this is not usually the case, and you have things like monopolies and just lack of information and transactions costs that kind of make it impossible for the market to ever be at this equilibrium point. The most basic way to look at trade is using the productions possibility curve. So this means that people, when they engage in trade, if country A and country B trade, people can consume more than they produce because different countries will have different efficiencies in creating different products. And when they trade, they can trade the products that they make more efficiently to a country that doesn't make them as efficiently, and both countries are better off. It's important to note that this is only the case in free and reciprocal trade, meaning that both parties engage in the trade willingly. And some people try to say that trade is a zero-sum game, meaning someone wins, someone loses, but actually it's a positive-sum game due to our self-interests. We will only engage in the trade if we are getting something out of it. First, we'll talk about the consumer surplus, which is represented by the yellow triangle in the graph. Consumer surplus is the total amount the consumer is willing to pay for the good compared to how much they actually pay. So if you go back to the steak example we've used in class, let's say I value a steak at $15 and the steak only costs $10. I'll have a consumer surplus of $5 because I'm willing to pay more for that steak than the price is set at. Producer surplus, which is represented by the blue triangle, is what a producer can/is willing to supply at the price that they charge for it. And this, as long as the producer surplus is above the variable costs, they will continue to produce at this level. And lastly, variable cost is the cost associated with producing one more unit of a good or service. Our first example of a market not in equilibrium is a surplus, and if you go to a car dealership, this is a good example of a surplus, because if the market was at equilibrium, as soon as the cars showed up on the lot, a consumer would be there to buy them, and there would never be any cars just sitting idle on the lot. But the reason this is an example of a surplus is because there's a difference between the amount supplied and the amount being used or bought by the consumers, and you can see that with all the cars that are just sitting on the lot. The next example of a market not in equilibrium we'll talk about is a shortage. And with Dorian bearing down in North Carolina, a lot of people are out stocking up on essentials like milk, water, and bread. And in this example, you can see the Food Lion near Campbell is basically out of milk. The gallon of milk selling for $3.49 is sold out, and so is the quart of milk at $1.59. They're both sold out. So what this is showing us is that price has no deterrent on this right now, since there's such a lack of milk in the store that people are willing to pay whatever they have to get some milk. And our last example of a market not in equilibrium is another example of surplus, which, given the conditions of Dorian, was a little bit surprising to us when we witnessed it. But the Food Lion and Harris Teeter has a massive surplus of water. As you see, it's out on the floor, and there's multiple stacks of water on crates throughout the store. The one thing this could signal to us is that the store simply overstocked their water and overestimated how many people would be getting water during the storm, because as you can see, there's a massive surplus of it.